Okay, so good morning, everyone. Obviously, we'll have more people filter in as we get started, but just to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to get started with our speaker today, Dr. Katelyn Carr, and she's going to be discussing recruiting and retaining families for longitudinal studies. If you have any questions during the session, you can feel free to just unmute yourself, raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat, and I will relay them to Dr. Carr as we continue. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free. We're a pretty small group, so feel free to raise your hand or shout them out. I'm happy to answer them as we go. So I first want to just give an overview. So I'll talk a little bit about my background, recruiting families, some considerations for recruiting more diverse populations, retaining families, and then some budgeting information. So just a little bit of background. I got my PhD here at UB in 2015. While I was a graduate student, I was a research assistant on a 2-year longitudinal study in 238 to 12-year-old children. So I was involved in recruitment and retention on that large study. Then in 2015, I started my postdoc, and I coordinated another 2-year longitudinal study in a diverse set of 309 6 to 9-year-olds with 40% low income, low education from 2016 to 2021. I'm currently assistant professor, and I have a lot of experience with these types of studies, so feel free to ask me any questions. So when recruiting families, there's a lot of things to think about before you start your study. What is the size of your study? How long will you be recruiting families? What age group are you looking for is going to change how you recruit. Thinking about where children and families are concentrated in those age groups and your budget. So what I want to do is go through a few different basics and at the end bring them all together to sort of answer these questions. So there are a variety of ways to recruit. I'm going to be talking about 4 major ways. There are recruitment databases, including the CTSI, thinking about if you want to start your own database or if there are other faculty who recruit similar or age-adjacent populations. You can do community outreach. For families, this is an excellent way to go. Schools, family events, community programs, and flyering. You can do word of mouth and referrals. So this works especially well for families. Participants in your study can talk to other families. And there may be other studies who can refer families to your study. And then finally, there's social media and electronic flyering. This is something when I talk about our case studies that we used in one of the 2 case studies, because for the first case study, this wasn't as popular with families. So Facebook, Instagram, there's lots of emails, websites, and electronic ads that we could talk about. So I'm going to go through each of these. So recruitment databases, you're going to hear this a lot. I really, really recommend working with the CTSI. For one of our case studies, the one that started in 2016, the CTSI was just sort of getting started, but they were still a big help in matching us with lots of community events and community contacts, and they have grown exponentially since then. So they have the Buffalo Research Registry, TriNex Research Match, and the Department of Emergency Medicine has its own program. For families, the Buffalo Research Registry is probably the best, but again, the CTSI is a really great resource for helping match you with different registries. There's also the idea of working with others who have their own recruitment database. So for example, the Division of Behavioral Medicine is working on resetting up our recruitment database where we keep a list of families who are interested in being contacted for future studies. Some things to keep in mind when working with any kind of database, either through the CTSI or through yourself or another faculty member, you're going to need IRB permission as well as permission from your collaborator. Collaborators who spent time setting up a database may require you to contribute to their contact list. That's something to keep in mind if you wanted to do that. You'll also need to update your screening or consents to give participants the ability to control their future contacts. So we always have a separate question on whether or not they want to be contacted and a separate question on whether or not they want their information saved for future contact. So we give participants a lot of options to make sure that they can control their own information. Setting up your own database. is something to consider at different points in your research. This requires an IRB for the database, and you'll need to consider its long-term use. The more people who use it, the more people can contribute to it. The larger your database, the more useful it will be. But you also need to consider keeping your database clean. So you need to remove bad contact information. You need to make sure people who no longer want their information are in there. You need to make sure that there's a number of things that are maintained and updated regularly, which requires regular work. And that may be something that will benefit you in the long run. It may be something that's not a good fit for you and your team right now. Word of mouth and referrals are another really great avenue for recruitment. Word of mouth is really, I consider word of mouth families referring and referrals being other studies referring families, just to tell you what the differences are. So for word of mouth, you can let families know you're looking for families to enroll. So often at the end of a session, I'll let people know, hey, we're still looking for people. If you have a specific demographic you're still looking for, especially like boys and girls, usually I try to say, yeah, we're especially looking for boys. If you know of anyone, families are pretty encouraged, and usually if the child had an enjoyable time at the session, they're happy to let other families know. Having flyers, brochures, or email templates ready to share with families to make it really easy for them to share the information. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to look up your information. They can just have something is a good thing to keep in your session materials and have available for families. IRB used to allow referral bonuses to families. So if a family referred a new family that enrolled, we would pay a referral bonus. IRB no longer allows you to do that, at least from the last time I talked to them. So that's something to keep in mind, that you're just, if you think that a family might refer people, it's good to talk to them. But if you don't think that they would, it's also fine not to ask them to do that. Referrals from other studies. So collaborators can do the same thing at the end of their appointments, especially if they have adjacent age groups and there are more than one child in the family. Those are great places to go. If your lab is close by the other lab, that also makes a difference because then families are familiar with the location on campus you are and feel more comfortable coming to you. You can share your materials with a trusted group to share with their families after data collection. So community outreach and flyering is a big one for families because this is the place where you can work and see people face to face before they screen for your study and enroll. So flyering, I encourage people to do the campus locations. Oftentimes people on campus are either already participating in studies or work on campus and are familiar with how research works. There's lots of community places that allow you to flyer with permission, places like the Y, the Gloria Parks Community Center. The libraries are also, I think, a potentially underutilized place. We haven't done this in a while, but the last time we did, we were able to drop our flyers off at the central library and they distributed to all the libraries. Libraries can also be used to target specific demographics since they're in neighborhoods, that if you have a neighborhood with the population you're looking for, you may just approach that specific library and ask if you can flyer on their community board. Flyering or sending brochures to schools is another great way to get families. This process is a little bit more involved and involves, hopefully, giving each individual child a flyer or brochure about your study. But it has really great output. So it doesn't involve contacting the principal or the central administration. So some of the schools in the area, like Kenton and the Buffalo Public Schools, have central administrations that would approve these materials, and then you'd contact each individual school to find out how many kids are in each grade that you would like to distribute the materials to, and how many kids are in each class. So you can pre-bundle materials for the school secretaries and drop them off. It is best practices to call and let the school secretaries know you're coming because it's all the elementary schools and I believe the high schools you'll have to be buzzed in and go to the main office where you'll be dropping things off anyway. So this is a more involved process, but it's been very lucrative. Every school is different, and some schools may not allow you to flyer there. The next thing we'll talk about is community events. So at any school that doesn't allow you to flyer, I would keep note of that and try to get into community events at that school so that you can work with and recruit those kids. Schools are also a really good way to target specific demographics if you have specific demographics of kids that you're looking for, because you can look up the demographics of schools and zip codes. So this allows you, if you are nearing the end of a large study and you're missing a pool of kids, this allows you to get a little bit more targeted. Events is another big thing with community outreach. So there's a lot of types of events that I would recommend people look into. This includes health fairs at schools. I would go to health fairs at any school, especially with the type of research that we do. We do a lot of eating behavior and physical activity research, so our research really fits in with that. If your research also fits in with that, it's a great event. And especially with schools that we haven't been able to flyer at previously. Schools also do PTA or family nights. Schools have sponsored their own daytime kids runs that have included like fairs. There are also, like, the Buffalo Zoo hosts a kid run, and there's a nominal fee for renting a sponsorship table. And we've gone to things like that. Any place where you can go and get face-to-face with people. Something that people may not have thought about is Bison's games. They've allowed us to come and table there. There are a lot of Bison game events that are focused on families, like Star Wars Night or Princess Night, where you might have way more kids there than you would get at other events. The Galleria Mall also does events where tables can be purchased for a fee or donation. If you wanted to do something like this, I would recommend it. There are a lot of kids that come through, like trick or treat night. It is a long day, so you have to plan on, I think it's like 8 or 10 hours they cover the event, and you'll need someone to cover the table for that whole time. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they're long, and oftentimes you get like 2,000 kids coming through. There's a lot of face-to-face ability to talk to families. There's a lot of community fall or spring fests, trunk or treat events at Halloween are places that you can talk to families, including children's sporting events. Be aware that for some of these, you'll need permission from the organizers, including the children's sporting events. I wouldn't just go to these events. We've always contacted the organizer and asked them if it was okay and what we wanted to do, and worked with them on what worked for them. Places like the fests or kids runs may ask you for a donation for a table. So as you're thinking about budgeting, that's something to consider, that it would be really great to include that in your budget. So once you've found community events, the first place I would look for them is anything sponsored by your department school or the medical school, because those are going to be very easy to get into, and they're going to keep you updated about future events. After that, there are a lot of things at elementary or high schools to look for events, and then sponsoring events. Preparing for a community event. The more things that you can prepare to make your table successful, the more successful your table will be. So you will need a team. So if you're planning on attending a lot of events, it's good to have a team with staff and students. So having undergrads attend events, they really enjoy talking to kids. And it's best to have an event rotation. So when you have your team and you're talking about what they'll be working on, letting them know that these events are often weeknights or evenings, or weekends, especially like the fall fests might be on Saturdays. The Galleria of Treats is always going to be like, I think the day before Halloween or 2 days before Halloween. So that's going to depend on when that falls. So it's good to have a rotation so that your team doesn't get burnt out on attending things sort of off regular hours. You should train your team to attend events to make sure everyone's comfortable with talking to both parents and children about your projects. And if you're working with other teams, that everyone on the team knows about all the projects that you're talking about, or knows the person at the event who that parent can talk to about a specific project. The other thing to keep in mind is being at a community event might lead to meetings with people running other events or programs that are interested in working with you. That's happened a number of times where I've been at an event and I've been able to talk to someone and got into a different event or into a different group that led to other key contacts. So even as a senior person, sometimes it helps to go to an event every once in a while, just to see if there are any contacts there. Training your team to make eye contact and smile and do all those sorts of things helps attract people to your table. There are a few things to know beforehand before an event is what time would they want you there to get set up? How long do they expect you to be there? Will they provide a table or do you need to bring one? If there's an outdoor event, some of the event places will have tables under tents. Sometimes they won't have tables under tents. If you're planning on attending a lot of outdoor events, it might be worth it to budget in a small table tent, one of those ones that goes in and out. In case it rains or even in the sun, it can be very hot, and oftentimes it's easier for your team to be at an event if there's a tent. And you also need to know how many people are attending. So oftentimes the large events will give you an estimate of how many people they expect to attend, and if they require you to pass things out, they will say you need to have this many items to pass out. But having an idea of how many people will attend will give you an idea of how many brochures or materials that you need to bring with you. When attending community events, it's really great to offer prizes or things at your booth. They don't have to be anything extravagant. This is just an example of something that you might purchase. This is from the Oriental Trading website of just a star assortment of things, of bracelets and glasses and different things. Kids love stuff like this, and they will definitely come to your booth if you have prizes. We also often offer prizes to the parents. So because we are an eating behavior lab, we have recipe cards we print out on high quality glossy paper. This is just one side. The other side has the instructions. We give those away. We have raffles for our full cookbook. That's something that we can do, and people can fill out for the raffle, and they can also indicate if they'd like to be contacted about studies. So one of the best things about attending community events is collecting people's contact information so you can reach out. It's much more difficult when you wait for people to reach out to you, but if you can get a phone number and an email and know what age group they're interested in, you can direct them directly to the right study and make it really easy for them to fill out an eligibility screening questionnaire if they're interested in that. So when you prepare your booth, you should have all of your supplies. I do recommend a tablecloth. Sometimes they can be borrowed from your department with the UB logo on it. I recommend any kind of brochures or flyers. Postcards are really good too because they're easy to take with you. A raffle box, you should have the cards and pens, supply your own pens. In the next slide, I'll be talking about games for kids to attract kids to your booth. And there should be a sign with your group name and UB's name on it. So when you want to get kids and families to come to your booth, you don't have to have all of these things, but keep in mind that what your booth looks like is going to change how easy or quickly kids come up to you. So if you have balloons, signs, flags, anything that might attract their attention, a game is a big one. So having some kind of activity. It can be something related to the things that your lab does, like a beanbag toss game. Our beanbag toss game is about our traffic light diet. So we have kids name a food, and then they throw a beanbag through different color holes in our board to indicate what color food it would be. And we give out prizes no matter how the kid does. Everyone gets a prize. It can be, if sometimes when we go to health fairs, we talk about portion sizes. So we have pictures of goldfish crackers, and we can give the kids goldfish crackers. It can be something related to what your lab does. It can be something related to what the event is about. So if you went to a kids run and you wanted to talk about physical activity, you could do something about that. But having an activity will help attract kids to your booth, have them stay at your booth for a few minutes, long enough to talk to parents, and being able to hand them something to take away with your name and contact information on it, and potentially get their name and contact information is the goal of community events. You want families to know you. You want families to see you out in the community. Raffles for parents, again, this is sort of like the child prizes. It can be related to something to your research. Things like printed recipe cards for everyone is really great. And having ways for both people to reach out directly to be able to give them something with your contact information on it, and have them, if they're interested, provide their contact information. So the next advertisement recruitment avenue is social media. This is in our recent studies, probably one of our biggest recruitment avenues. You can get a lot of people to fill out a screening survey on social media. If you're looking for families, what has worked best for us out of all the sites is Facebook. Families and moms especially are often on Facebook. I know, talking to friends who have kids, a lot of the elementary schools in the areas post school announcements on their Facebook page. So families are often on Facebook pretty regularly to look at those sorts of things. So out of all the social medias, that has been the best. But as we all know, social media changes pretty regularly, so that's something to keep in mind. Having a business page is going to be beneficial to you, in my opinion, like a lab or a division page. So this is an example of what the Division of Behavioral Medicine's page looks like. I'm going to talk about how often to post and what kinds of things to post. So there are a lot of ways to post on Facebook, and a lot of things that you can post. If you create a business page for either your lab, your division, maybe your department, I think the bigger it is, the more difficult it is to manage. But either way, you want to regularly post things that are unrelated to studies. So when we were doing this regularly, we were posting between once and twice a week about all kinds of things related to the things our lab does. So these are some examples of activities to do in the snow with children, some different healthy meals, New Year's resolutions, how to help your children play outside and get some physical activity. You can also consider including information about your lab and about the things your lab is doing. So a special lecture or a poster session featuring pictures of the people in your lab are all things that you can do. So thinking about posting between 4 and 8 times a month. In addition to any study advertisements that you're posting, you can pre-organize and pre-post everything, and it will, post as it goes. It does take quite a bit of organization, but having a small team of people in charge of it tends to work out pretty well, with one person at the top approving all the posts before they go out. You may have a staff member who's really interested in doing this. You may have students who are really interested in doing this. Once you get organized, it doesn't take very long for students to find many places, many types of posts that you can use. So this is a time investment, but as you could see from the previous slide, our page has about 1,000 followers. So we don't always have to create advertisements and pay Facebook for those. We can just post the new studies that we're doing on our page and we will still get screeners. So it's something to consider investing in. Facebook has two ways to advertise. They are often changing things. So they may have added new ways to advertise, but this is the general ways. You can boost a post or you can purchase an ad. So you can post something on your business page and there's a button to boost it where it doesn't cost very much money, but it makes it more visible to your followers. You can also purchase an advertisement. So these are a little bit more expensive, but they work. You can adjust your budget and spend different amounts of money. And you can make ads on Facebook very targeted to specific populations. Populations by demographics, by geographic location, by interests and likes, by different pages they might follow. This is an option if you really need a targeted population that purchasing an advertisement might work very well for you. So the boosted posts tend to be less expensive, but the ads can be targeted. So oftentimes, if you already have a following on a business page, I always start with a boosted post. And then if we sort of scroll through and run through all of the people and we stop getting contacts and interest from it, ads become a little bit better, or ads are better when you need a specific demographic that you are recruiting besides just families. There are some considerations when doing social media that you should keep in mind is that the Facebook business page, I feel, is quite complicated. There are a lot of things that you can do on it. And I recommend if you wanted to do something to watch a tutorial or look up a how-to page on that. There are a lot of how-tos, but they've changed a lot of things on the business page that it doesn't seem like it from looking at the page, but the back-end administration is fairly complicated. It allows you to do a lot of things, but because they change it so often, I do recommend that you will have to invest some time into learning how to use it or have a staff member do that. I would not recommend having a temporary or potentially temporary staff member create your business page for you because they will be the main administrator. That is very difficult to change. You can add more administrators and remove old administrators, but they'll always be what's called a super admin. So it's best if the PI or faculty member of the lab sort of does it for them, with the understanding that they might have to close if that person leaves. The posting frequency. So if you only post about studies, you will get followers, but you will get a lot more followers when you post about non-study related things. And I think that once a week is a really great goal for someone starting out. 4 times a month is a very reasonable number of postings to monitor and schedule. You will need someone to monitor the page, create the postings, and schedule them, but you can, again, schedule ahead of time. You know, on the first of the month, you can schedule everything for the next month and then not have to worry about it until the first of next month. A few other considerations. So Facebook versus Instagram. These are both run by Meta. So they are 2 separate sites, but the same company. That does make it very easy to cross-post. We've not had great luck on Instagram, but that was 6 years ago. Instagram is very different now, and social media changes, so it may be worth cross-posting. Instagram has moved a lot more to video, which I feel is much more labor-intensive to have research studies post about. So, you know, we're going to stick with posting links and images. But it just depends on what your team is interested in and how much time they have. And I know with research, that's often not a lot of time. So focusing on Facebook and maybe cross-posting to a similar Instagram account may be the best of both worlds. UB does have social media guidelines. You do have requirements to use UB photos for banners and like ID images. If you are out of those guidelines, they will contact you and tell you and ask you to update them, and give you information about where to find the photos and things like that. So UB has a lot of stock photos, and you can choose from there. Um, so keep in mind that they do often change it. It won't be obvious to you when they do until someone contacts you to tell you, hey, can you update your social media sites? So in addition to Facebook, there are a few other electronic advertisement avenues that you should consider because they tend to be very easy, and you could get a lot of people filling out surveys for them. And sometimes recruitment is just a numbers game where you need so many people to screen before you can get enough people who are eligible and enrolled. So again, Facebook, you can also, besides doing ads and boosted posts on your business page, you can ask about finding groups that target your population and talking to the moderators about being approved to post about your study in that group. So for example, there are a lot of mommy groups. They often don't want research information posted in those groups, but things like that might work for you. Garage sale groups are also, we've had good luck there, because there are people looking to buy and sell things, and this is sort of up that alley, about something kids could do for small amounts of payment, whatever you're paying for your research study. There's some other options. Craigslist is free. We often get a lot more non-eligible screens, but it only takes a few minutes to post. There are email listservs both at UB and outside of UB. There are email newsletters we have had to pay to be featured in a newsletter. But we have gotten screens and eligible people from places like Funds for Kid in Buffalo. They do a newsletter. The Mother Time Marketplace has its own Facebook page. This is better for very young kids, infants, and toddlers. They are personal consignment, so they schedule large meetups to consign your baby items and clothing, and then buy baby items and clothing for like your next size up for your child. So both of those places have sold us ad space previously. Just a few other places we haven't talked about. Something that I do recommend, because you can target specific zip codes, is direct mailing. So you'd purchase a mailing list from direct mail companies like Data Axle, which was formerly Info USA. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but Print Services will send bulk mailing, which will save on postage for you because they have a bulk mailing postage, and you can target specific zip codes. Newspapers is something else people have asked me about. This has increased in price pretty significantly, and I would say the Buffalo News, especially after it got purchased, has far fewer subscribers than it used to. Community bees are much more affordable, and that might be something you want to think about, especially if there are community bees that target populations you're interested in. The other avenue with newspapers is to work with the communications department and send out a press release about your project. I don't know, the Buffalo News used to always pick them up. They are a much smaller newspaper than they used to be. So I don't know if they would always pick it up, but that's something that would cost you time, but you wouldn't be paying for advertisement space necessarily if you worked with the communications department to send out a press release. So we've talked a lot about recruitment avenues. So creating your advertisements is the next thing that I want to talk about. I am not a marketing person, so I won't talk exactly about how to design your poster or exactly what kinds of wording you should use. But I have some examples of things that we've worked with marketing consultants on and talk about the things that I really like about the way that we've started to do advertisements. So there's a few things to think about when first starting is your study nickname or your short name is going to potentially attract people to your study. Having a short, easy name or an image associated with the study helps people remember it. So you can use acronyms. So like UB ACEs was the UB Activity in Children's Environment Study. Um, I really like using the CTSI site, and I have noticed that when I use alliteration, I get a lot more people interested in the study. So, a few years ago, I did a study called Draw and Delay for Kids, and I got a lot of people contacting me about that. Our current study is called Snacks and Screens for Kids, and I also get a lot of people interested in that study too. I would recommend purchasing some stock photos depicting your target population. So what age group kids, what population you're looking for, having a variety of different types of kids doing different things. There are a lot of options for purchasing stock photos. I do recommend you purchase the photos for your use rather than having like a rented account. There are some alternative free options. So UB has its own photo archive to see if there's anything you can use. Those are going to be mostly like photos of campus, but that might look nice on your advertisements to show the place people might be going. But having pictures of kids doing the kinds of things they're going to be doing in the study is, I think, really powerful and makes for a nice advertisement.
Caitlin,
Yes.
there is a question about if you could comment on using AI generated photos or figures, or if you've been familiar with that.
So I have I have personal objections to that because I because of the way AI gets its information is it's sort of copying things from other people, in addition to the fact that AI is so power intensive. I have some personal objections to what I call watering our computers when people may not have fresh, clean water themselves. So I wouldn't use them. And I think that many younger people will see that they're AI generated and that might look weird to them. So I don't necessarily think that that's the best avenue, but as it's getting better, I hate to cut off that avenue for anyone. So I think that if you find something that really works great for your study, you can use it. But I would keep in mind if you're printing it out and distributing it to thousands of people, any licensing issues that may come with that. So buying stock images will take care of that for you, and you won't have to think about it. Um, does that any follow-up questions about that? I know if you don't share my personal feelings about AI, I totally understand. And I see a reason to use that, but I'm not sure if those images are at a place where that would attract people to your study. And I'll show you some of the images that we use and why it might not be the best.
The only other comment that was there was that would you share these slides? So I guess after, if
Sure.
you don't mind, you can just send them to me and I'll make them into a PDF and then I'll send them to all the attendees.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Um, any other questions about that for right now?
No, they commented back and said, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Um, so let me just talk a little bit more about creating your advertisement. So the IRB does now have flyer templates in the Click library. I think they're pretty good to start with, especially if you have a graduate student or a student working on a project. But if you are going to be doing a lot of your own grant-funded work, it might be recommended to set up your own regular template that your teams use. I'm going to show you some brochures. I really love either brochures or postcards for kid studies because they're small, they're easier to send out in goodie bags or take-home folders. So if we drop them off at schools, a flyer is going to be that first thing in there. It's not going to be mixed up with all the other 9.5 by 11 sheets of paper. Brochures give you an option because they're double-sided of getting a lot more information to the families. If you are in a space where you are budgeting for a new study, you might consider including an advertisement consultant if you have the budget that can help set up some regular flyer or brochure templates that your lab can use. And they may also have some additional contact for recruitment avenues. So that is something that we've done in the past, and I'll show you. So this is our advertisement. So this is a stock photo that we purchased. I think that for kids, seeing real life pictures works a lot better than cartoon pictures. So if you wanted to do cartoon pictures, that's why I can see the AI fitting in a little bit better. But we often more use actual photos of kids, and I think that's where AI is not doing great at. Those pictures of people look pretty weird. So you can see this swoosh is one of the branding things. I'll show you on the next page how that works. But we often set up, so this would be either a postcard or the top of a flyer. We use action language on the thing, fill out the survey now, call now, those sorts of things will help motivate people to do it. This was a short survey link, but you can include a QR code on any of your materials. Most people nowadays, this was when I think almost everyone has a smartphone now. When we did these advertisements, that wasn't necessarily the case, but QR codes have become a lot more popular. So this is one example of a brochure. So you can see we have all these kids. It was a study about food, so they all had little foods. This was a recommendation by our marketing consultant. He also had this swoosh made for us, so we branded most of our materials with that. So this would be the front of the brochure when you looked at it. This would be the first thing you would see when you opened the brochure, and then there'd be this information on the back. This is what the inside looked like. So we had a lot of space to include a lot of information about the study, all the things that parents needed to know, and then like a really short version of that if they didn't want to read this or didn't want to read it again. So these are the kinds of things that we had sent out. We printed them off in glossy, full bleed, so there was no borders, paper. The UV Print Services does all that. They can create very, very nice looking materials. We are professional, but it made us look very professional. So I really like brochures. So for our next study, we also did a brochure. Again, the front page, this was more of a study where they were doing things on the computer. So we had pictures of kids doing things on computers. This was the first page when they opened it up, how to join on the back. And then the inside, again, the short version and the long version. What do parents need to know? So you can see that this gives a lot of information in a really small package that people can decide how much information they want to read. It includes all of our contact information. If it were nowadays, I would include a QR code on the back. But things like this help your study look very, all the studies are legitimate, but it helps it look like more than just a student study. And I feel like families really respond to this pretty well. Some additional things to consider when you're recruiting is your eligibility screening. So the easier you make your screening process, the more people you will get to finish your screen. If you make it a little bit harder, you'll get fewer people finishing your screen, but if they're eligible, they're probably more likely to show up. So if you make it very easy, we get a lot more no-shows, but that's sort of a balance. If you have extra time to recruit, I do feel like it's better to make screening the easiest you can, to try to get as many people as you can screened and then try to bring them in and be comfortable with a certain percentage of no-shows. If you have a study where you don't have a lot of time, you might want to not make barriers to screening, but maybe when you want to schedule, you need to talk to them on the phone rather than just emailing or texting. So this might translate to greater no-shows. So it just really depends on your population. If you only have a few people, in the area who meet your criteria, you might want to talk to them on the phone and do screening that way so that you can start right away establishing a rapport with the family so they're more likely to show up. If you have a very general study, like the 2 projects that I'll present, making it easier to screen gives you a wider range of people who apply. I also recommend that when you're setting up your eligibility screen, you include information about recruitment. So how did they hear about your study? When you are making your sheet of information, include that information, include information about demographics, include information about what their study status was. Did they show up to their appointment? Did they not show up to their appointment? Were they eligible or not? All that can give you some information when I show you the case studies about how well you're doing and what the best things that you're doing, what the best avenues are for your population. So you can keep track of about your best recruitment methods over time. And when you have a study, you can focus on those. When you have a larger study, you can really dial into your population. You could also include money spent on different recruitment avenues for future budgeting. I would say with a lot of the things that we've talked about recruitment avenue-wise, the prices change pretty often. So this is not as useful unless you wanted to do a cost-effectiveness analysis about some different ways. Like Facebook is pretty cheap. You get a lot of screens, but you also have more no-shows. What's the cost-effectiveness of them? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the resources at UB and some examples of study recruitment stats, just to share like what has worked for us in the past. The biggest resource for recruitment, this is the CTSI seminar. Go to the CTSI and talk to them. I highly encourage that they have, these are all the different things they can help you with. This is straight from the website. Research tools and compensation, advertising materials, best practices. You can review your study materials by community members, especially if you have a targeted population, and work with them to create a personalized plan. So this is a case study. So this was 8 to 12-year-old kids recruited between 2011 and 2013. So I have some information about how they were recruited, how many we got to fill out a screening questionnaire, how many enrolled in the study. So then this is the percent enrolled. So we have our own database. So that ended up being that, and direct mail and school brochures were our top 3 places we got recruitment from. But you can see that some of these had lower percent enrolled. So there may have been more people who were either ineligible or who were eligible and were no longer interested or dropped out of the study. The way that this spreadsheet was set up, I couldn't differentiate between those things necessarily. But things like a database is going to be really great, but that's going to be a big time investment. Study referrals were very good. So this was referrals from another study with mothers doing grocery shopping that we were able to work with. Word of mouth is a little bit lower, but in the next case review, I'll show you that in more diverse populations, word of mouth really works. So we had a variety of things that we tried, and you can see that you get a variable number. So even though our database was 41%, we got 51 people enrolled. Those are good numbers. Any questions about this? Okay, so this was more than 10 years ago. So this was from a more recent study with 6 to 9-year-olds. So we did a lot more electronic advertisements and a lot more community events in this case. And I was able to break it down between total and our non-white participants. So you can see Facebook was our biggest. We got our most screens off of Facebook, but we didn't have our highest percent enrolled, so about 23%. When we look at our non-white participants, about the same. So it's a really great resource for any type of population you're looking for. You are able to target. So either way, you're getting about the same percent enrollment between different populations. Our database, we had far fewer non-white participants fill out screening surveys from there, but way more came in. So you can see that these are people who have probably already worked with us and were interested. You can see things like word of mouth and referrals are different in percent enrolled, that those non-white populations were higher with that, as well as community events were about the same and school flyers were about the same. So you can see we have a lot of different avenues, and just keeping track of how people hear about your study, I do think is important, because then you can look at it and see if we needed to include different kinds of populations, what places should we target? This was a very general study. There wasn't too many eligibility criteria. Oh, I see the question for Facebook enrollment. Was this based on paid ads or just your business profile? So I would say this was a combination of boosted posts and paid ads. We always started with boosted posts on our Facebook. And then especially towards the end of the study, when we had those specific cells that you needed to fill in, we would do paid advertisements. Any other questions about our actual recruitment stats for this particular study? Okay, I know I have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to talk a little bit about diverse populations and retention. So the CTSI is a really great resource. They have a lot of community contacts, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. This is a great place to start. Connecting in person is really key for our diverse populations. So word of mouth and referrals worked really well. Being at events and being in the community and talking to families helps too. If you can be at events where both parents might attend, towards the end of the study, we ran into an issue where we would talk to the mom on the phone. The mom would be really excited, and then the dad would say, "No, I don't want to do this." Which is totally their choice, but if you can be at events where both parents might be, you can make both parents more comfortable about participating in your research. Electronic recruitment, we do get a lot of diverse screening completions from those. This may have less conversion to enrolled, but sometimes you're just looking for the numbers. You need to screen 100 people to get 15, and sometimes you just need to make sure that you're screening all of those people. So retention is about only a few things, not only a few things, but recruitment staff is going to be a big deal. So maintaining a consistent staff member who's always in charge of scheduling helps. They always contact the same person. They always contact the same email or phone number. That helps. If your staffing does need to change, having email templates and scripts so that the process remains the same, even if the person doesn't, is going to be a great upfront time investment. You can set up a study email, either with UB if you wanted to keep your contact consistent, rather than having like my email be my contact for the study. If I left, then the study would have to change contacts. A lot of information would change. Families might get confused, especially with retaining them over a course of a number of years. So having a study email is a really great idea. You can also use a Google Voice number to keep contact consistent. So these are free. They're associated with a Gmail. You have to use them at least once every 6 months. But you have to associate them with a real phone number, but you can change that number. You can push them through to the office phones. And as a bonus, they can be used to text families. So I've noticed in the last 8 years or so, families really love texting. We do all of our appointment confirmations, reminders by text. Families are used to this. All the doctor's appointments do that. I think schools now sometimes do texting. So these can be used to text families. You can't do any automated texting on Google Voice. So it's always a person that has to at least copy and paste that information into the box. But because it's connected to a Gmail, if you have a Gmail that is shared between staff members, any staff member can go on and do that. And it's not connected to a device. You can do that from multiple devices. So keeping your study contact very flexible and the same throughout your study is going to really help with your retention. Keep in contact with families between appointments. So I'm specifically talking about having like 1 and 2 and 3 year follow-ups. If your appointments are closer than that, there are some other things that you could consider doing. But keeping in contact between longer term appointments is important. You can use newsletters. So I know in the past, Dr. Leonard Epstein has used newsletters, like monthly newsletters, to keep in contact with intervention studies where the intervention was all done at home and there was very little contact with the research staff. In our just longitudinal observational studies, we often use postcards or holiday cards in addition to birthday cards. So in our previous study, we had decided that every child would get 3 cards every year. So every child got a birthday card on the month of their birthday. They got a New Year's card and a 4th of July card. So we decided to choose non-denominational holidays that wouldn't be attached to any religious things so that our diverse population, we wouldn't have to sort by different kinds of holidays they might celebrate or not celebrate. Kids really love getting cards in the mail. For New Year's and 4th of July, we also sent small prize things with them. We sent paper New Year's glasses. We sent like little temporary tattoos with like blue and red fireworks on them. The kids really, really loved that. And I think that it reminded the families that they were part of the study. So the other thing is making scheduling flexible and contacting people about a month before they could come in. So if you're doing a longitudinal study, you should have a cutoff date for appointments. So maybe you want to think about plus or minus 4 weeks. Contacting ahead offers more options than right before so that you can be more flexible with their schedules. If you have a multi-session, like a multi-appointment setup for your follow-up, you can consider having a 1 short follow-up which you only collect your most important dependent variables so you can retain that information. Our most important dependent variables for both of the case studies I talked about were height and weight. So we often collected height and weight measures only to make the appointment 15 minutes. Just come in, we'll get height and weight, we'll pay you, and you can get out of here. So that helped retain people. The second study I talked about, the follow-up went into COVID. So we brought height and weight equipment to families' homes and included a video of how to use the equipment and collect it and send us the data. That is definitely something that I would consider if we were having trouble retaining people, is that it was really easy to go there. We didn't even go in their house. We just sat in the driveway. We handed them the equipment. They gave it back to us after about 15 minutes. If you have the option of doing something like that, it helps your retention numbers. You can have families provide additional context at baseline. And you can also consider non-traditional contact information. So a PI I was talking to works with people who have very low income and oftentimes cannot keep a telephone number. And they have had a lot more success with contacting them through their social media, as these don't change, but their home phone numbers do. That might not be something that works with the study, and that might not be something you're comfortable with, but it's something to think about depending on the population that you're working with. These are just some retention examples using these processes. We have retained in that first study with the 8 to 12-year-old kids between 88 and 90% of our families. We did even better in the second study after learning some things from the first study, retaining like 95% of our families. I think COVID and going to their houses helped a lot because families really didn't have to do anything. They just had to be home for 20 minutes, which made things really, really easy for them. When you're thinking about budgeting, these are all the things that we've talked about. Just consider that as part of your budget. Consider things as part of your retention budget. Think about them ahead of time if you're at the budgeting process. So if you're just starting, where to start? So what study stage are you? If you're budgeting, budget for everything mentioned here and start your social media presence right away. If you're starting what I would consider a small-ish study, like less than 100 families with wide recruitment criteria, so you're anticipating a lot of people being eligible who fill out your screener, I would start social media, but focus on your study. boosted posts, and community outreach and advertisements. If you're doing a really big study or a smaller study with really narrow recruitment criteria, I would focus on connecting with research resources, getting really great ads, and finding the people who can connect you with your specific population. So all of these things, laying this groundwork, if you're not starting right now, starting Facebook, thinking about a database, and considering your screening methods, are all things I would recommend that you think about, even if you're not planning a study right now, but you're thinking about starting one. And thank you. Thank you for attending today. Any questions?
I don't see any in the chat yet. For the slides, once Dr. Carr sends them to me and I turn them into a PDF, I should be able to get the email out to all attendees by this afternoon. But we just want to say, if there are no questions, thank you, Dr. Carr. This was wonderful and so much good information in these slides. So I'm sure everyone will really appreciate the slides.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to the person that just asked the recorded version, this should be posted on the CTSI YouTube page, which I'll include in the follow-up email in a few days. All right, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.